Welcome to the April 19th, 2022 Charleston County Historic Preservation Commission meeting. This meeting has been noticed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. This commission acts in review and recommending capacity for designations and removal of historic properties and districts. The commission also reviews proposed National Register of Historic Places nominations. The commission has final decision-making authority on certificates of historic appropriateness. Good afternoon. My name is Vice Chair Donna Gardner. To my left is Commissioner John Wright and Jason Crowley. To my right are Commissioners Pat Jones and Melanie Millar. Seated at the desk, facing the dais, is Commission Attorney Mark Bell and Joel Evans, Director of Zoning and Planning. Joel, would you please introduce your staff?
Sure. To my left is Andrew Millicent, Deputy Director. And at the podium is Emily Pinkett. She'll be presenting the cases today. To my right are Marche Miller and Savannah Murray.
Thank you. I would like to remind you that in order to get a good recording of the meeting for the minutes, please speak loudly and clearly into your microphones. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the March 15th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion and a second? All those who approve the motion say aye. I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you.
Discussion, just, Joel, given the number of folks that are here, if I abstain, can that be done, or is there too few people?
For the district of 10 Mile?
For the motion, to vote on this particular motion,
For the...
because I just wasn't here last time, so I was going to abstain.
I'm with you, I'm sorry, yes. I think you'll be fine, yes.
Well, I wasn't here either.
It's okay, though.
All those who approve the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those who disapprove say nay. All those who abstain?
Aye.
Okay. The ayes have it. One abstention noted. The next agenda item is HIST 0322-00052, a request for a certificate of historic appropriateness. Emily, you may proceed.
Thank you. This request is for a certificate of historic appropriateness to construct a single-family detached dwelling along with accessory structures at TMS 287-0000183, which is a property located within the Ashley River Historic District. The subject parcel previously obtained certificate of historic appropriateness approval for a property line adjustment, as well as to dig a 0.37 acre pond. This is the location of the subject property when looking at the county as a whole. The subject property is currently vacant and is zoned low-density residential R4, as are surrounding parcels to the north, south, east, and west. The comprehensive plan recommends it for agricultural, rural agricultural future land use. Here is an aerial view of the subject property. The Ashley River Historic District is just under 25,000 acres of land, including 136 contributing sites, structures, and objects. This slide shows a map of the district, which was expanded to include everything in red in 2010. Here's a map of the contributing sites and structures within the Ashley River Historic District. The district includes plantations, gardens, vernacular buildings, slave settlement communities, agricultural fields, and phosphate mining operations. Important historic functions noted in the National Register listing include agriculture, domestic industry, defense, landscape, and transportation. Here is the proposed site plan for the property, which includes a single-family dwelling, a pavilion, pool, greenhouse, barn, and pond. Here are elevations of the proposed house, the proposed pavilion, and the proposed barn. And the applicant has provided responses to all of the applicable approval criteria. Staff recommends approval since the approval criteria have been met. And this meeting was noticed as required. Thank you.
We appreciate staff's comprehensive report. Are there any questions for staff from commission members?
Just looking at the sighting of the barn where it's number E, it looks like it's built right on the property line. Does that meet all of the county setback requirements? Is that what that line, the black line is?
No, this is all one property.
Okay, could you just explain what the black line is on the edge of where the barn is located? Is that the property line or is that?
I am not, we'd have to ask the applicant what that is. I'm not sure what that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say, whatever happens, whatever is submitted for permitting, they would have to meet the setback requirements.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for staff from commission members?
I have a question. Does the National Registry require, is there any certain material they have to use that has to be used in the construction of this property?
No, sir, the National Register does not stipulate things like that.
So, but is there any potential for future development on that property, and will that then have to come back before this commission?
Correct, yeah, any future development plans would have to come in front of this commission, of course.
Are there any other questions for staff from commission members? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in support of this request? Please come forward.
Hi, Commission. I am Jody Crosby. I am the designer for this project. I wanted to address your question, Mr. Crowley. The side setback for accessory buildings is 3 feet. The barn is 5 feet off of the side property line. Therefore, it does meet that side setback requirement. Any future development that they might pose, sir, yes, they would most definitely have to come before this board, and we would certainly intend to do so to get the appropriate permissions that we need. And the material facades, in this area, we are looking at more for appropriateness of land use. So, but I can tell you that the material that will be used will be fiber cementous, it will be masonry, it will be very historically appropriate to what was in this area long ago. Do you guys have any particular questions for me? Of course, I'm in support of this application, but if I can answer anything in particular, I'd be happy to do so.
I have a question. Is this just family residence that will be created here, built here? Family?
Yes, ma'am. It's a single family, that's
Single
correct.
family. No other question.
Does anyone have any other questions from the commission?
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this request? Okay, thank you. Before we have any further discussion, is there a motion and a second from the commission?
I'll make a motion to approve the construction.
Thank you. Been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion from commission members? Seeing as there is no further discussion, now we will vote. All those who approve this motion say aye.
Aye.
All those who disapprove say nay. The nays have it.
No, the ayes have it.
I'm sorry. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. This is the final decision of the Historic Preservation Commission. If any person with a substantial interest in a decision of the Historic Preservation Commission chooses to appeal this decision, they may do so to the Circuit Court of Charleston County. Such appeal shall be filed within 30 calendar days after today's date. The next agenda item is HIST 0322-00054, a request for a certificate of historic appropriateness. Emily, you may proceed.
Thank you. This request is for a certificate of historic appropriateness to construct 2 single-family detached dwelling units and a detention pond at TMS 583-0000412 and TMS 583-0000214. The subject properties are within the Phillips Community Historic District. The subject properties are working with our code enforcement to mitigate the unpermitted clearing of both sites. The applicant has submitted clearing and grubbing permits, applications that are under review, and any associated applications for building permits and zoning permits will not be issued until those violations are resolved. This is the location of the subject properties when looking at the county as a whole. Here is a closer view of the 2 properties when looking at the Phillips Community Historic District. So the Phillips community is a Reconstruction-era South Carolina Land Commission platted community where former plantation land was subdivided and sold to black and white landless farmers and tradesmen. Most parcels are narrow and rectangular in shape and oriented to the roadway, while larger parcels are located around the perimeter of the platted boundary and along the waterway. Most properties within the district contain the original homes, and if they been subdivided at all, only to grant to the heirs of the original landowners. The subject property is zoned Special Management Area 3S3 and contains a single-family residence. Surrounding properties are also zoned S3 and contain either single-family homes or mobile homes. The comprehensive plan recommends the properties for the urban, suburban, cultural, community protection, and future land use category. So here is the proposed site plan for one single-family dwelling at 2972 Bobo Road, as well as a 15 by 30-foot detention pond. And the applicant has described that a future single-family dwelling will be constructed at 2970 Bobo Road in a farmhouse style. So here's the proposed elevation for the single-family dwelling at 2972 Bobo Road. The applicant has described this design as a barndominium, which includes a dwelling and garage space. Here's an aerial view of the properties. And this slide shows the current condition of the properties, and as well as Bobo Road and the neighboring properties here as well. The applicant has provided responses to all of the applicable approval criteria, and staff recommends approval since the approval criteria have been met. This meeting was also noticed as required.
Thank you, Emily. We appreciate staff's comprehensive report. Are there any questions for staff from commission members? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in support of this request? Board, you have 2 minutes to speak. Please state your name clearly into the microphone.
I'm Bellino, and I'm the applicant. So I have 2970, 2972. My daughter lives at 2968. So the detention pond is due to the drainage issues on that road. It doesn't drain, so I'm trying to drain my 2 lots because as you saw the pictures, we're kind of the lowest spot there, so everything drains back onto there. So I'm just trying to take care of that issue at the same time. And then, yes, when we live in Dunes West now, so when we sell that house, when my son graduates, we'll build a single family on the other lot.
What?
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Have you worked well with the Phillips Community Association to ensure that some integrity is kept within the community? Have there been some conversation at all?
I haven't talked to anybody from the Phillips community. I've talked to the neighbors around there. I actually bought the property from Mrs. Whitcomb, which lives behind there. She's on Bennett Charles. So she knows what I was going to do from the very beginning.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
I do. What is a barn dominium?
Sorry.
Looks like a barn, but basically I'm parking vehicles in the front part, and the house is on the back side. So that way, when I build the other house next door, it's going to all look like one piece of property, because we're going to put a fence all the way around all 3 lots. So it looks like one big piece of property.
My question was, I noticed that there's letters sent out to community members, property owners, but is this kind of going to go with the copacetic with the style of the community? I mean, is it?
Everything around me is mobile homes.
That's what I was going to ask you, so that's why I think maybe there was a discussion.
That's what's
Right.
across the street. There's a picture of the house, the picture right there, 2968, that's my daughter's house.
Okay.
So the rest of the houses on that side are similar to that. That one got moved after Hugo from Sullivan's Island.
Okay. When you say fencing, are you talking about frontage as
No,
well?
down the 2 sides, across
Okay.
the back and back up.
Thank you. I do see all your drainage issues, so it's probably a good idea to put the pond for
So
sure.
that was the reason for the detention pond.
Yeah.
Originally, I was going to put it closer to 2968, but the attorney said, no, that's not a good idea. Need to put it on, split the 2 properties.
I did have another question. So then, Charleston County, where's the regulatories as it relates to the pond and requirements and stipulations for that?
There are none. Because of the size, I don't, I'm handling my own drainage, so there is no stipulation from DHEC or anybody else on that. Checked on that when I asked them about the pond. They said because it's under a certain amount of acreage, I don't fall under any kind of jurisdiction.
When the house does get submitted for permitting stormwater, we'll be given a copy of the plans to make sure it meets their stormwater manual.
And I've already sent it to stormwater management, and told them how I was doing, because I'm putting French drains and everything into there, so that's where it's just going, so instead of taxing the county's drainage.
So this time there's no permits for, you said you're waiting for permits for something.
No, it's all in permitting right now.
Okay.
So all the runoff will go into the pond?
Yes. Mm-hmm. The drainage ditch will stay at the front, which is the county's, but I'm gonna drain my own back to that pond.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this request? Okay. Before discussion, is there a motion and a second from the commission?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion to approve.
The motion to approve has been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion from commission members? Seeing as there- go ahead.
My comment is, I mean, the barn dominium seems out of context with the area, but I mean, not hearing any other input from the community, I'll assume that doesn't have any concern then with the neighbors. It just seems like looking at the houses on this street, they're all single story, similar looking. And this seems a little out of place.
No HOA, so no guidelines.
Seeing as there is no further discussion, it is time for the vote. All those who approve the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those who approve say nay. The ayes have it. This is the final decision of the Historic Preservation Commission. If any person with a substantial interest in a decision of the Historic Preservation Commission chooses to appeal this decision, they may do so to the Court of Charleston County. Such appeal shall be filed within 30 calendar days after today's date. The next agenda item is HIST 03-22-00053, a request to designate the 10-mile community as a historic district. Emily, please proceed.
Thank you. This request is to designate the 10-mile community as a historic district on the Charleston County Historic Designation List. And at the May 2nd Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, they will hear an application to remove 5 grand trees and encroach into 2 others for a proposed 29-lot subdivision on TMS 614-0000-060-061 and 062, which is within the proposed historic district boundary. This is the location of the subject properties when looking at the county as a whole. Here is the proposed historic district boundary, which spans both sides of Highway 17 North in the Allwindaw area. The 10-mile community was recognized in the 2016 Charleston County Cultural Resources Survey update as a remnant freedmen community having significant social organization and settlement patterns. The Charleston County Comprehensive Plan recommends the majority of the properties in the proposed historic district boundary for urban-suburban cultural community protection, future land use. Some of the properties are located in the Highway 17 North Corridor Overlay Zoning District, 10-mile neighborhood business service node, and others are recommended for rural residential. Zoning in the proposed historic district is primarily R4 and RR, rural residential, and the properties contain single-family dwellings and manufactured homes. 6 properties within the proposed district are zoned community commercial. 18 properties are within the Highway 17 North Overlay Zoning District in the 10-mile business service node and contain single-family homes, manufactured homes, or are undeveloped. The proposed district also includes 4 planned developments. The area is surrounded on many sides by development in the town of Mount Pleasant. These areas are zoned either public institutional, planned development, rural conservation, low-density residential, or medium-density residential, and contain residential development or are undeveloped. The surrounding areas in the unincorporated Charleston County are zoned R4 or MHS, or planned development, and contain residential development or are undeveloped. Here's an aerial view of the proposed district boundary. And next we have some site photos, first from Robbie Glover Road. Here are some properties off of Beehive Road and Highway 17 North. These photos show an old storefront as well as the current community center. And here are some photos of Chandler Road as well as the existing funeral home off of Highway 17 North. And here are some examples of homes within the proposed historic district. And also some adjacent new development that is occurring. And next, I'd like to share an abbreviated history of the 10-mile community, which was provided to us by the applicant. The 10-mile community was originally named based on its location approximately 10 miles from the Grace Memorial Bridge, which was the former bridge that connected Mount Pleasant to downtown Charleston. The majority of the 10-mile community, specifically the portion south of Highway 17, was formerly the Beehive Plantation. And that plantation consisted of about 500 acres of highland and 900 acres of marshland. After slavery was abolished in the U.S., many of the newly freed slaves settled on Goat Island and Capers Island. However, after a major hurricane demolished several areas on those islands, the African Americans built canoes and crossed the intercoastal, and then eventually set up residence on the former Beehive Plantation, which we now know as the 10-mile community. As with most African American settlement communities, the communities were self-sufficient and relied on the skills of its residents. The families who established the 10-mile community were hunters, farmers, carpenters, plumbers, seamstresses, cooks, midwives, and entrepreneurs, just to name a few. Christianity was very important to the community. Also, many of the former and current residents of the 10-mile community have served in the U.S. military. Both historically and today, many of the African Americans in the 10-mile community are homeowners, which is particularly significant when looking at the United States, where only 40.6% of African Americans are homeowners. And in the 1930s, the 10-mile community and other settlement communities created local baseball teams. So the 10-mile Eagles played on the baseball diamond on Seafood Road. And the applicant summed up their application by stating that the history of the 10-mile neighborhood has evolved from when African Americans were enslaved in South Carolina to becoming a community where African Americans have thrived over time. Thus, the 10-mile community requests to be designated as a historic district in order to preserve the history of the settlement community for future generations. And here is a photo of that 1888 Beehive Plantation plat. This slide shows Edward Mortimer Legree's tombstone, which can be found on Lucian Street, as well as the yellow schoolhouse where many children in the community were educated before going on to Lang High School. Many residents in the 10-mile community worship at the Greater Zion AME Church, and although they first congregated in what they called a bush tent, members of the community worked together to acquire land and erected the first church in the community in 1881. And here's a photo of the 10-mile Eagles, the community baseball team. And these before and after photos show the destruction that Hurricane Hugo had on the 10-mile community, where they sustained a direct hit from that storm. Here are the approval criteria for historic district designations. The applicant provided responses to criterions 1, 3, 4, 8, 9, and 10. And because the application meets several of the approval criteria, staff recommends approval. This meeting was noticed as required. And as part of the application, 68% of the registered voters within the proposed district boundary have signed off in support of this application. Also submitted in support was a petition of non-registered voters that included 113 signatures, as well as 438 individual letters of support. So here is a map showing which properties had registered voters that signed in support of this application. Those are shown here in orange. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We appreciate the staff's comprehensive report. Are there any questions for staff from commission members?
I have a question. Can you go elaborate on the BZA application that you mentioned and point out where in the district this is for, and how does that relate to us and impacting this potential application today?
So we always tell you what applications we have in process. So that is one that we do have in process now for this area. So we wanted to make you aware, and the BZA will be made aware of this application. But the way we process things is applications that come in, the ordinances in effect at the time they're submitted are the ones that control. So, the BZA applications, were made when while there is no historic district, unless of course the BZA defers it, which they could do. But for example, let's just say we have a subdivision going on in this community. If they made their subdivision application, while this district application is going through or before, that application, would go under the current ordinance, so it wouldn't have to come back to you for approval if the historic district is approved. But, in the future, if they have to come back for individual home permits to construct the homes and the district has been approved at that time, then they will have to come back for those approvals.
Is there a way to sort of ballpark show on one of the views where, with the boundary lines up, where the application is? Registered vote, yeah, that one.
Yeah. I can look at the TMS, yeah.
Yeah, Emily will pull up GIS and look at those
Thank
tax
you.
numbers for you.
I don't have my URLs here, sorry guys. So it's 3 properties. So it's this property, and then everything south, so 61, 62, and 60. And this is along Gadsdenville Road, and just to orient you, the marshes here with Robbie Glover.
Where's the community center?
Yep, the community center is
Right.
further up this way,
Okay.
1 block. I can zoom out to fit both if you'd like. So these are the 3 properties. The BZA will hear the case, and here's the community center.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Properties are designated for single family, what?
Yes.
Okay.
When will the BZA hear on those?
That'll be on May 2nd.
And so this, we're talking about July before this would be officially designation, right?
And as Andrew said, we're just letting the board know the other current applications that are in
Certainly.
process.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Do the commission members have other questions of the staff? Thank you. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in support of this request? Please come forward and state your name. Speak clearly into the microphone.
Hi, Commission. My name is Kelly Vicario with the Preservation Society of Charleston, 147 King Street. The Preservation Society is supportive of enabling local protections to help preserve the integrity and character of historic places in Charleston County. We're really appreciative of you guys as well. We have enjoyed having an open and consistent dialogue with the applicant, Ms. Carla Pinkney, and commend her efforts to conduct extensive community outreach and assemble a thorough application. It's encouraging that the 2016 Historic Resources Survey update identified 10 Mile as a significant historic African-American settlement community, and that the Charleston County Comprehensive Plan recommends the majority of land in the proposed district for urban, suburban, cultural community protection, future land use, recognizing that any future development should be compatible with existing land uses and development patterns to help sustain the community's sense of place. These guiding documents provide a strong and sensible foundation for the proposed 10 Mile Historic District. And as this application progresses, we are hopeful that additional research and documentation can be conducted on the community's history and evolution to help support the Historic District designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward and state your name clearly.
Good evening. Pearl Askew, 977 Gadsdenville Road, Awandar, 29429. I stand here today as the president of the 10 Mile Neighborhood Association, and as the president, officers, members, advisors, and the committee members who gathered this information for presentation today, we proudly ask and request that we become a designated historical district. We appreciate all the hard work of everyone, including staff and the committee members, and especially the 10 Mile community residents at large. We had a huge meeting on Saturday, and we had a huge turnout, and everybody, hopefully today, is in favor of this, and we appreciate the consideration and the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward and state your name.
Thank you. Carla Pinckney. Good afternoon. On behalf of the 10 Mile community, I'd like to take a few minutes to explain why this community should be granted the historic district status. Can you hear me through the, okay, hard to breathe. The present-day 10 Mile community reflects the rich and diverse cultural history that traces its roots back to the 1800s. The 10 Mile community is located in Allendale, South Carolina. This is in the northern part of Charleston County between Mount Pleasant and McCullenville, South Carolina. The town, as it was said during the application, was named by the Seawee tribe and translates into red clay. The 10 Mile community and Allendale are also home to an oyster shell mound, the Seawee Mound, that was created by the Seawee tribe, and this mound is listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1970. The majority of the 10 Mile community, as it was reflected during the application, was formerly known as the Beehive Plantation. The plat that we submitted from 1881 shows that the southern portion of the community retains the same boundaries today, less the areas that have been annexed into the town of Mount Pleasant. And as we also said during the application, many members of the community, both former and present, served in many of the different wars, from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, the Gulf War, the Iraq War, and the war in Afghanistan. As we also noted during our application, many residents, greater than 66% of the residents who are African American descent who are in the 10 Mile community are homeowners. This is significant when only 40.6% of African Americans in the United States are homeowners today. A significant percentage of the property in the 10 Mile community is heirs property. This has afforded people with the benefit of home ownership, but it also poses complexities as well, which I'm sure you've seen throughout the Charleston County area. And also, as highlighted earlier today, in September of 2016, a consultant, the New South Associates, developed the Charleston County Historic Resources Survey Update to the Charleston County Zoning and Planning Department, and identified the 10 Mile community, among others, as significant to the social organization and settlement patterns, in addition to the stories these communities have to tell in the Gullah communities of unincorporated Charleston County. In October of 2018, the Charleston County Comprehensive Plan was adopted by the Charleston County Council as ordinance number 2034. And as a part of this 5-year review, the residential special management future land use designation was replaced by the urban suburban area cultural community protection future land use designation. This was intended to protect these communities, but in fact we're facing in 2022, we're facing an unprecedented fight for our existence. And if we do not act now, there will no longer be a 10 Mile community in the future due to the aggressiveness of developers and the threat of people such that the threat of people who've lived there for generations will be forced out due to substantial increases in taxes for excessively expensive homes being built in the community.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. That's okay. I was a little slow getting to the podium or the microphone. Good afternoon. I'm Cashin Drole with Historic Charleston Foundation. Thank you to the Commission for the prior work that you've done to preserve the form and character and history of African American settlement communities. As you all have duly recognized, they are a really important part of the history of the Low Country and our cultural landscape. Some of the earlier work done documenting this community actually goes back to 2009 when survey work was done for the Sweetgrass Basket traditional cultural property on that northern part of Highway 17. That work was done to document the community, buildings, and the landscape. They also conducted oral histories and did some complex survey work, and 10 Mile was an important part of that work. So there is a long, in addition to that 2016 report, there is a long history of documentation of the community. And Ms. Pinckney and the community have
done yeoman's work to add to that body of research with their application today. Historic Charleston Foundation is very proud to support the community in their application today. They have demonstrated the broad support, and that, as y'all know, that takes a lot of pounding the pavement, so to speak, to get all of these signatures and all these support letters together. They have done a good job in documenting the boundaries, appropriate and historic boundaries for the community, and I would encourage the commission to approve their application today. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Good afternoon. Paul Spees, 231 Palmetto Bluff. Unfortunately, I wasn't invited to the meeting Saturday, so I can't really speak to that. On the surface, it sounds like a good idea. However, I've got a few questions. Why is the boundary so gerrymandered about where the community is and isolated out certain sections?
I can speak to that slightly, sir. While the applicant can speak to the actual boundaries, some reasons why you're seeing that is because this can only be applicable to unincorporated Charleston County. So anything that's been annexed into the town, that could be what you're seeing in gray here. So for example, this property here and these properties here, is that what you were referring to, sir?
Well, I mean, you can look right there in Pepper Plantation, Chandler Road,
Gotcha.
there's a lot of unincorporated properties there.
Gotcha. I would defer to the applicant to answer the question about that boundary, yes, sir.
That's why I'm asking the questions is, how's it get gerrymandered like this?
I can explain.
And I have.
Joel, would you like to answer that?
Well, the only thing I wanted to add is that the process for a historic community is community-driven. It's the community that brings forward to staff and to the commission what they feel is the boundary of their community. Staff assists in providing the documentation that they need to prove the registered voters in the area, but ultimately it's up to the community leaders and the community to define what their boundary is. So back to what Emily's response was, that would be a question for the community is how they came about with the boundary. I think they made, in the presentation, the application, they showed the historic platting as the basis of where they started. But from there, any questions about the boundary would have to come from the community itself.
Well, I think that would be a good idea for the community. On the website, I see in the paperwork the approval letters or the support letters from people out of state that don't own property in the state. They aren't registered to vote in the state, up in Maryland. I'm just wondering, how does that happen?
So the percentage, the requirement for a historic community requires 51% of the registered voters. I believe that the application for this particular district presented 68% of the registered voters within that boundary, which meets the requirement for someone to bring forward the application.
Well, like I said, to start with, it sounds like a good idea, but there's a lot of unknowns here. Like, what are the standards that have to be presented for this application to build my house if this goes through to the historic thing? I mean, I listened to these other standard variances, and it doesn't appear that there's any standard. It's all just by approval.
There are criteria in the ordinance, and staff went through the criteria in those two previous cases, which is, let's say this historic district is approved and someone made an application for development within it, it would go through that certificate of historic appropriateness process, and then the applicant would address how they meet the criteria, and staff would review that and make a recommendation. In those two cases, staff felt like the criteria had been met, and so did the board, and that's why they recommended approval.
This gentleman over here had a concern about the barndominium and the trailers, mobile homes, and how that related. So where is the standard for judgment on, does it meet the criteria of the neighborhood?
It's contained in the county's historic preservation ordinance, and that's what those applications are measured against.
So again, it's just by feel that if I want to approve it or not, because it doesn't match the mobile homes. That's why I'm trying to find out what is the standard that you use.
I have a question, sir. Do you live in that area?
I'm getting ready to build a house in that area.
Okay. And I think Joe Evans clearly indicated that this application is community driven. And given that that community is a settlement community and it was identified in 2016 by Charleston County, they drove 68% of that community drove themselves to want to become a historic district. So, what I would think would be in the best interest of you, if you intend to be in the part of that community, would be to have an opportunity to speak with the folks in the community.
Well,
so then you can then understand that it is community driven, and then as you saw today, just like with the Bobo Road incident and the Phillips community, that had to Phillips Community Association had leverage to either say approve or disapprove of whether or not that was done. So I think it gives the 10 mile community that same leverage. So I would think in the best interest, if you're going to be in the community, to at least clearly understand that they're a settlement community that was identified in the 1800s, right. Historical significance. So they, in return, decided 68% of them decided that they wanted this designation. So that I think in the best interest it would be certainly.
As I said when I started, I think it's a good idea on the surface, but I wasn't invited to the meeting. Okay, no one contacted me to put me in the community.
There's a hand raised.
I'm sorry.
Would you like to come to the?
It's not, that's not proper.
That's not. No, ma'am. We'll have to.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
I'm finished. I just wondering how the system works here. If, I've owned that property for a while. They have my tax back number. You can see that I'm the owner.
I just have a statement I'd like to say, sir. We were listening to those two cases, and I hear you, and I see what you're, I understand your point, but we were listening to historic appropriateness of a creation of a building or a home or a pond, and this situation is about a district.
I understand that.
It's different,
I understand that.
Okay.
When you make it the district, then I have to apply for another permit.
Correct.
Okay, and what's the standard for historical appropriateness?
Because
in this community, there's different historical architecture over here versus over here versus over here. So where does it judge? How do you judge that?
We go by the criteria that we're given. It's stated in our paperwork. These are all written down.
Do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah, Emily, go ahead and pull them up.
So it sounds like your interest is in the approval criteria for the certificates of historic appropriateness, so I will scroll to that. Alright, I apologize, guys. So here we are, eventually. All right, so are you able to see that, sir?
Yes.
Okay, so everything listed under A through E are the approval criteria for the certificates of historic appropriateness application, sir.
So just looking at A right there, when you have different architectural styles from one area to another area, how do you judge that?
That is what the commission utilizes, the criteria to then make that decision.
Proximity to historic buildings, proximity to other historic landmarks, materials that are used with those particular things. Not necessarily, we were mentioning the barn dominium in the home. If there's not, HOA or historic building, that in proximity, then that's a huge issue, a huge criteria. Location, something that is historically a building, not necessarily a home that was built in 70s, 80s. So I think, like she said, they're all listed.
200 feet, 300 feet.
It's specifically stated in the criteria. So you'd have to, and we'd have to look at, like, specifically, we went and actually looked at a place over on the Ashley River where there was an actual plantation home, and we look at proximity to that home, you know, as far as criteria for building or adding properties. And so we that's what we were looking at today.
I think this lady had something to say.
She has to wait for you to finish, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have to repeat again? Name, address?
Yes.
Pearl Askew, 977 Gadsdenville Road, 10 Mile Community. If the gentleman wishes, we'll be glad to sit and have a conversation with him in reference to the community at large. Where his property is located, is resident, or that's just a parcel? That's just a question, and we'll be glad.
1 acre, vacant lot.
We will be glad to have a conversation with him if that's okay with the gentleman. Tell me your name again, I'm sorry.
Speeds, that's behind you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul Speeds. We will have a conversation.
Are you related to Craig?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We know the team is
Is there any, okay, come. Please come forward and state your name clearly.
Hi, I'm Wendy Lockhart. I live at 1404 Chandler Road. My husband and I have been living there since 2011. We are not included in the voter registration in support, but we are in support. So that just adds a little more than 68%, that kind of thing. And I know that in the meeting on Saturday that we went to, there were a lot more people that were not included in this application that are in support of this. So there's that, but I just wanted this council to know that we're newcomers to this neighborhood. And this neighborhood, this community has embraced us, and they love us, and they welcomed us. And I know change is inevitable, but I hope that you will approve this request. We want to maintain what we have in our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Please come forward and state your name.
Hi, I'm Penny Wakefall. I reside at 3560 Highway 17 North. The yellow house that they presented is originally the schoolhouse that a lot of our residents attended from our great up until today. So we still have some people who are still alive, been there, and we are in approval of this 10-mile community historical, and we just want y'all to approve it as well, and hopefully we can be a part of it as well, being that we are the schoolhouse that they all attended. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward on behalf or opposed to this report? Okay. Before any discussion, is there a motion and a second from the commission? Oh, please, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Craig Askew. I live at 987 Gadsdenville Road. I would like to just give a big round of applause, not applause, but anyway, thanks to the people in the community, Carl especially, who worked extremely hard, and Ms. Askew worked extremely hard to get this application coming forward, and the staff at Charleston County. I know y'all, this is a relatively new thing, these historic districts, but I think a very needed thing, especially in the East Cooper area where development is going crazy. It's hard to keep up with. And I can't, what's your name, young man? Paul. So to kind of answer, where do you live?
Bill.
But so to kind of answer your question, when the community got together to work on the historic preservation district, it did an organic thing where it went from neighbor to neighbor to neighbor in familiar surroundings where the people know each other. So if they excluded you in that whole process, for example, the Tupelo area, there was no Tupelo area when we were growing up. There was no such thing. There were no houses there. So again, organically, the historic preservation district grew from people that we know from neighbor to neighbor. And if someone might have been overlooked, it's probably because they're new, and we are trying to get to know people. But the problem is, again, when you have really hurriedly quick development and the people don't get the opportunity to engage with new community members at all, and it creates a problem. It creates a friction, a very frictionated problem, high tensions. I know because I've got development going on right in front of my house, and it's super annoying. Super annoying. So therefore, we have districts like this to me, to slow it down and ask the people, what is it that you feel is, what is it you like? What is it that you want? We don't have HOAs where I live because we live on heirs, a lot of us live on heirs property or near heirs property. We need some kind of protection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Holly Steele.
Please come forward so we can hear.
Holly Steele. Oh, wow. Sorry. So I wasn't going to speak, but I just wanted to say that I am in support of everything. I did not know anything until I got the letter from Charleston County. And as a realtor, I understand this gentleman's concerns. But when I bought my house in 2005, everybody came to me and said I bought into the family. And I think that's important to preserve. And that's all.
Can you have your address for the record, please? Can you name an address for the record?
Nelson View Drive.
Pearl Askew, 977 Gastonville Road, Alvin, 29429. I would just like to ask, if I can ask those in support to stand, is that appropriate for your committee? We have several people here. They're not going to speak, but if they can stand, making that request, is that okay?
Yes. That's fine, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. State your name and address.
Robin Moses, 1125 Chandler Road in Owendall. My piece of property that we live on, my husband and I am the fourth generation to live there. It's been in my family for over 100 years. So it is, the Owendall community, the 10 Mile community is an all-inclusive community. It's just, there are subdivisions that are coming in and everything, but I actually feel like at home being back on my family property. We moved there 7 years ago after my father passed away to take care of my mother, and that is my home. Even though I had lived other places and everything, I actually feel like that I came home when I came to 1125 Chandler Road. So I am in favor of this. I didn't know anything that was going on, and I've been a member of that community for a while until I got a letter from the county, but that's okay. I really am strongly encouraging you all, hope that you will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on behalf or opposed to this project? Before discussion, is there a motion and a second?
I'd like to make a motion, please.
Go ahead, I'll second it.
I'm going to give a detailed motion. If you'd like to hold on your second until I give it. I'd like to make a motion to approve under criteria 1, which has significant inherent character, interest, history, or value as part of the rural county or heritage of the county, state, or nation. I'd like to approve under this criteria due to the associations with the post or the Reconstruction era and post-Reconstruction era establishment of a planned community. I'd like to approve under criteria 3. It's associated with person or persons who have contributed significantly to the culture and development of the country, state, or nation due to its associations with the Gullah Geechee heritage of this community. Criteria 4, because it exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, social, ethnic, or historic heritage of the country, state, or nation. Once again, as its associations with the Reconstruction era establishment of this planned community and its association with the Gullah Geechee culture. Criteria 8, it's part of or related to square or other distinctive element of community planning due to its associations as a planned community from the purchasing of a former plantation into a distinctly planned area. And criteria 10 has yielded or may likely to yield information important in prehistory or history, potential archaeological site, due to the contribution of the Siwi Nation archaeological resources as stated in the shell mound.
I second that.
For my discussion, I just want to add in, I think that the majority of the contributions of its significance are intangible and related to the planning and culture and community, not to the architectural materials. And so I want to make that distinct as well, similar to other settlement communities that we've seen. And this goes to the conversation earlier. There are different building types or different building styles, there's different building ages, but it's the associations of the Gullah Geechee community and the planning aspects of this as a community that make it distinct. And you may see some odd buildings and some normal buildings, some mundane, some interesting, and everything in between. And you know, that is why I made a comment earlier in the previous application, but ultimately voted to approve because there wasn't a clear argument as to why it shouldn't be approved, but it was an acknowledgement that it was a strange feature. But at the same time, that was also a community that had barns, it had trailers, it had brick homes, wood homes, and similarly to this, as we go through future applications for new developments, new homes, new buildings, what will be significant is how it contributes to the planning aspect and the development of this area, and not the materials of the buildings. So I just wanted to add that into the record as well.
So the motion has been made and properly seconded, and there has been some ample discussion. Are there any other commissioners who would like to make some comments?
I would just like to congratulate the community because, you know, when this Preservation Commission was formed, and it is new, but it was formed strictly so that the communities would have the opportunity to determine their designation. And I think this commission is valuable and invaluable to the history of the settlement communities, and particularly east of Cooper, but all settlement communities. So I want to thank you for the time you took to organize and galvanize and get this done. But this is exactly what I had hoped for when this Preservation Commission was formed, that we'd get these opportunities.
I'd like to add thank you for your time and your energy, because I know what's involved with this, with the planning. And as a retired educator for 32 years here in South Carolina, I understand the importance of continuing the history in the community. So thank you.
Thank you. If there is no further discussion at this time, it is now time for the vote. All those who approve the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those who disapprove say nay. The ayes have it.
good luck with your process, because still some more to go, but good luck.
County Council will hear this request at an upcoming public hearing. The request must then undergo a hearing at Planning and Public Works Committee, and then 3 readings for approval at council's discretion. The next item on the agenda are the director's remarks. Joel?
Nothing really at this time. Just a reminder, the B Field community, it went through public hearing, and it'll be going to the Planning and Public Works Committee meeting this Thursday. So that's on track to become a district as well. So if all we may have 3 by the end of the summer. So we'll see.
Great.
I have something to add. I meant to bring a card, but Commissioner Sullivan is dealing with some health issues, and I just wanted to, I think it'd be nice for us to put something together to acknowledge her as she continues to deal with her recovery. And I can come back for the next meeting with a card, or if there's something maybe staff can help me with in the meantime. I think it would just be nice to acknowledge her hard work and give her our well wishes.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no further business, this meeting of the Charleston County Historic Preservation Commission stands adjourned. The commission will hold its next regularly scheduled meeting on May 17th, 2022 in council chambers. Thank you all for your experience.